I have a soft spot for Dragon Quest VII. I've never finished it, mind you. To my enduring shame, I've still yet to finish any Dragon Quest game despite my love for the series, but I've spent a good 32 hours exploring its various island vignettes according to my save file. I picked it up alongside Dragon Quest VIII for the 3DS when I heard the eShop was closing, since I'd been curious about them for so long. Dragon Quest VII is not one of the more popular entries in the series, despite being the longest. Most fans will gravitate towards Dragon Quest V, or 8, or 11, and so I was shocked to recognise the Kingdom of Estard when it showed up in the most recent Direct. We Dragon Quest fans have been anticipating HD 2D remakes, such as the upcoming Dragon Quest 1 and 2 collection, and despite rumours, I thought it was certainly too soon to be hearing about any others, let alone 7. But now that all is out in the open, I think it's pretty clear what Square is aiming for here. I think the plan, should sales expectations be met, is to remake all of 1 to 6 in the HD 2D style, and then perhaps 7 to 9 in the Reimagined style. I've seen people complaining that 7 of all games is getting this treatment instead of 8, to which I would like to politely point them to the 3DS remakes where this very same thing happened. 7 was remade first, followed by 8. 7 is never the obvious choice to start with, but perhaps that's for the best. It both gives the devs time to hone their craft with this particular style, and sets up 7 to have better sales figures as people buy it while waiting for 8. It's clearly a strategy that has worked before. I now fully believe that Square Enix plan to have every mainline Dragon Quest game, barring 10, sigh, on modern consoles with modern design sensibilities and overhauled visuals, and that makes me so excited. It's worth mentioning, however, that I've seen the odd naysayer here and there grumbling about remakes changing visual styles and gameplay elements too much, and while I personally disagree on this front, I do think it would be nice of Square to release a Dragon Quest Classics collection at some point to preserve the game's original formats. The main concern people seem to have about Dragon Quest VII Reimagined is this passage from the official blog post. The story has also been significantly streamlined. Told for a series of vignettes with an overarching narrative, it's been reworked to be pacier and more accessible to players, while still maintaining the narrative depth the game is known for. And I can understand the trepidation. Dragon Quest VII is long. The longest game in the series, in fact. Remember my 32 hours? That puts me at about a third of the way through the game. It hasn't been that long since I unlocked vocations. You see, unlike most Dragon Quest RPGs, 7 opts for a series of vignettes. As you unlock and visit different islands, you play through mostly self-contained stories with an overarching story unfolding quietly in the background. It achieves this, from what I've experienced, to great effect, and I can't think of a single island I'd outright cut from the game from my travels, in terms of my enjoyment. Each one is a joy to encounter, initial perplexement giving way to understanding as you explore what's going on. But in terms of progressing the overall narrative, the game certainly drags its feet. We'll have to see how the story pruning shakes out on release, but I will say the stance I've landed on in terms of remakes altering the original game in recent years has been that the original game still exists. It's less accessible than it once was perhaps, but what we're getting here is an additional version of the game, not a replacement. If the changes made and reimagined lead to a lesser experience, we'll still have both the PS1 and 3DS versions of the game to fall back on, whether that's through second-hand acquisition or emulation. Or Square, or a Classics collection. That's how you remain in the loop. So, for now, let's put aside the question as to whether this will be a subtractive experience and instead look at what this version of the game adds to the original. Firstly, the handcrafted diorama-style visuals. I wasn't entirely sold at first, especially not on those shots of the overworld, but the more I look at it, the more I like it. It reminds me of that recent Super Mario RPG remake in that it looks both classic and yet modern. I think I may ultimately prefer the aesthetics of the 3DS version when put side by side, but this game is super pretty to look at in its own right, and I think it suits Dragon Quest VII thematically too. The battle scenes in particular look very striking. It also seems to have voice acting, which even the 3DS version lacked. We don't yet know whether this will be a fully voice-acted game or whether this will be reserved for cutscenes, but I like what we've heard so far. Pokemon should take note. I think most intriguingly for me is the dual vocation system, Moonlighting. In previous games, such as Dragon Quest III HD 2D, you've been encouraged to train up one vocation to a certain level, then swap to another, keeping the original skills whilst adopting the new vocation's stats and equipment needs, as well as its eventual skills. I've always felt this was rather clunky, as you end up having to train up party members from level 1 multiple times, albeit at an accelerated rate. This may still be the case, but with moonlighting, it sounds like you'll be able to level 2 vocations at once, either speeding up this process dramatically or eliminating the need to do so at all. It's been a while since I played 7, so I can't quite remember if skill stacking was a thing in that game too. Vocational perks sound interesting, almost like a sort of ultimate ability you can charge up, similar to pet powers in Dragon Quest XI, albeit based on individual vocations rather than party members teaming up. I'm also excited for the inevitable quality of life updates. If I recall correctly, the 3DS version of 7 is where they started to ease up on some of the archaisms which increased the difficulty, such as being unable to save mid-dungeon. However, instead of Dragon Quest III HD2D's generous autosave system, you were required to make a temporary save file which would quit you out of the game and delete itself on loading, which always made me just a little paranoid that something would go wrong and I'd lose all progress forever. There's no word on how saving will work in Reimagined, but they have mentioned things such as instantly defeating weak foes that you'd otherwise one-shot in the open world, setting automated tactics for your protagonist and party, and the ability to speed up battles. It's like a whole new game! In summary, I am delighted by Dragon Quest VII Reimagined from what we've seen so far. I love the amount of effort that's been put into modernising this game, despite it being one of the less popular titles, although if we're being truly fair, I think 6 is the more overlooked title. As for me, I'm gonna hunker down and get Dragon Quest III HD2D finished so I can finally say I've beaten one. And then we've got 1 and 2 to look forward to in about a month. Oh heavens! What a time to be a Dragon Quest fan.